Let's talk about aspartame. First of all, aspartame is made up of three things: methanol, which of course is what produces blindness, aspartic acid, and phenylalanine. These are all poisons. Aspartic acid, of course, produces brain lesions. This was known back in the early 1970s. Methanol produces blindness. Phenylalanine is what you see certain in the brain, and in high dosage it produces trauma. We have a number of excellent books, and there should be listed on your handout. Dr. Roberts' book, Aspartame Disease, an Ignored Epidemic. Dr. Blaylock, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. Our 4-tape set on aspartame, and the video, Sweet Misery. Now, what is the mnemonic? A, adipose tissue. You hear, how many times have you heard about there's an obesity epidemic in America today? Do you know that if you drink Diet Coke, why, you're going to get fat? Why? Because the aspartic acid, they knew this back in the 70s. If you fed rats aspartame, why, they got fat. And then, of course, they dissected them. They found it produced lesions in the brain, so you get obesity. And it doesn't matter if you cut back on your diet, why, you can't get the weight off. So it produces a lesion in the hypothalamus that predisposes to obesity. But nobody seems to know that in America today. And the more diet drinks you drink, the fatter you're going to get. Then, of course, S. A for adipose, S for sugar diabetes. Aspartame will create diabetes, it will complicate diabetes, it will produce juvenile diabetes, and it will lead to diabetic blindness. So this is all covered in Dr. Roberts' book. P, pregnancy. It'll actually prevent you from getting pregnant if you're a woman. The last thing you want to do is take it, and it will also lower testosterone levels. That's how you begin to sterilize the male. We have the articles that show it lowers the testosterone level. How many men today are having sexual dysfunction? And now we have a new solution. We call it Viagra, or... No, seriously. I mean, we have actually created a very, very real problem with our men, and we've done this intentionally, and they know exactly what they're doing. I asked earlier, how would they ever get to sterilize the men in our population? Well, we're going to give them products that will lower their testosterone level. And then, of course, A would be precocious adolescence. Our young girls are certainly going through menarche much younger than they used to. I mean, it used to be 13, now it's down sometimes 11, 10, 9. Why? Because aspartame has an effect on the endocrine system. T, tumors, produces, and this is known to produce tumors, testicular, uterine, mammary, ovarian, thyroid, pancreatic, and brain. They have all sorts of studies to show in animals that produces this. There are laws that say you can't give anything to people that produces tumors in animals, but they're doing it anyway, and you're not hearing about it. A, well, that's for ALS. That's like Lou Gehrig's disease, anterior lateral sclerosis, or multiple sclerosis, really. There's been a definite tie-in to people with MS-like diseases and aspartame, NutraSweet. Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases. M for memory loss. And people who drink a lot of this get memory loss. Pilots, and fighter pilots and airline pilots are told, do not drink Diet Cokes before you fly. Why? Because it affects your brain. But they're not telling you that. And then, of course, E for attacks the endocrine system. So that's aspartame.
Dozens of web pages warn against the ill effects of aspartame. One of them is supported by this man, Dr. H.J. Roberts, a private physician and author of several articles and books on aspartame.
Somebody has got to put this out and say, be careful.
Roberts calls aspartame an ignored epidemic.
Is that I have over 1,300 in my own database that people have had terrible reactions to products containing aspartame.
Dr. Olney, do you think that aspartame should be on the market today?
No.
Why not?
Because it hasn't been demonstrated to be safe.
Dr. John Olney is a researcher at Washington University in St. Louis.
I fed aspartame to infant mice and found that it produced the same kind of brain damage. That it indicates that if there's an adverse effect, a serious adverse effect in the animals, and if that adverse effect is absolutely proven in the animal research, then it should not be approved for human use.
Dr. Olney took his findings to the Food and Drug Administration as Ceral, the company that developed aspartame, pushed to get the new sweetener to market. The FDA looked at the research, and in 1975, put aspartame's approval on hold. It set up an independent panel of doctors to study aspartame. In 1980, that public board of inquiry unanimously ruled aspartame should not go on the market.
We had a major responsibility to evaluate.
Dr. Vernon Young from MIT is the only surviving member of the board of inquiry.
Our conclusion was that on the basis of the evidence presented at that time, we weren't able to assure ourselves of the safety of aspartame in that particular context, and that we advised the need for additional studies.
They had some concerns about it and felt that there should be additional animal studies done before it was approved.
Dr. Jerry Goyen was the FDA commissioner then.
I looked at that, read it at the time, obviously, and said that, well, what we had to do next was set up an internal committee of people who had played no part in previous studies of aspartame.
But Goyen never had the chance to review the results. That's because he was forced to step down in 1981, when newly elected President Ronald Reagan appointed a new commissioner. That commissioner quickly approved the use of aspartame for dry foods like cookies and pudding mix. Just 2 years later, he okayed it for carbonated drinks. We tracked down that FDA commissioner, Dr. Arthur Hall Hayes. Hi, Dr. Hayes.
Yes?
My name's Aline Sirgani with Fox 5 in Washington.
Yes.
Can we ask you a few questions about aspartame?
FDA has all the information you need.
Yes, but sir, you were the FDA commissioner when aspartame was approved, and so we'd like to ask you a few questions.
No, I really have no comments. All the information is available to Food and Drug Administration.
Sir, don't you think it's your responsibility as the FDA commissioner when aspartame was approved to answer some of our questions?
Not now. I'm no longer commissioner of the FDA.
Do you think the public was ever put at risk? Sir, was the public ever put at risk? Sir, do you think he put the public at risk, sir?
Yes, I do.
Senator Howard Metzenbaum has his own concerns.
I can say that I was dissatisfied with the manner in which aspartame was approved.
So Senator Metzenbaum requested a review of the FDA's approval process.
I have a kind of recollection of it that sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. And it wasn't from aspartame.
To understand the senator's concerns, you have to realize what this little blue packet is really worth. Searle sells millions of dollars of aspartame each year. It's used in nearly 6,000 products, including Diet Coke. Searle had a vested interest in keeping aspartame on the market, and the American public had a craving for a calorie-free sweetener.
It was a big public issue. It was a matter of considerable publicity and public attention.
Between my first and second seizures, I asked my neurologist about aspartame and a possible link to seizures.
The Senate's public hearings took place in 1987, but nothing came of Metzenbaum's worries. The committee decided not to request more studies and left aspartame on the market. So Fox 5 obtained these campaign contribution records. They show that Searle made contributions to several senators involved in keeping aspartame on the market. Senator Howell Heflin received at least $5,000. Searle also contributed at least $3,000 to Senator Orrin Hatch. Senator Robert Byrd got $1,000, and Representative Henry Waxman also received a $1,000 contribution. And that's not all. We also learned that several federal officials were investigated for possible ties to Searle.
I think the chairman of the FDA wound up in having some sort of economic relationship beneficial to himself with Searle Manufacturing, who at that time owned the rights to aspartame.
The issue is really not an issue of science, it's an issue of politics.
Then we go to fluoride. What does fluoride do? Well, F for fertility, it lowers fertility. There are all sorts of studies to show the impact on fertility. Frenny's paper, which we'll have in the new syllabus, shows definitely that you fluoridate the water, the fertility goes down. You take the fluoride out of the water, the fertility goes up. It also lowers the testosterone level. So they're hitting us with the aspartame, they're hitting us with the fluoride. They know these things. They just don't want you to know. But you need the scientific papers, and we have them. Then U come from undifferentiated cells, cancers. And of course, Dr. Burke, who I had the opportunity of talking to before he passed away, he was the chief of research at the National Cancer Institute for many years. He and another doctor actually analyzed the cancer rates in cities that were fluoridated and unfluoridated, significantly higher in fluoridated cities, cancer rates, and in unfluoridated areas, 50 to 100% increase in the incidence of osteogenic sarcoma, many studies, and then they'll always come out with another study saying it isn't true. Why? Because they don't want you to know the truth. And you look at how these studies are, they're usually financed by people who are related to the people who are selling the fluoride to the cities. Then, of course, osseous damage. Well, we know that you almost will double the incidence of hip fractures and Colles fractures and bone fractures in people, older people, in fluoridated areas. There are 8 different studies that show the relationship between hip fractures and fluoridated areas, but then if you want to get rid of the older people, you fluoridate the water. R for thyroid depression. Actually, how many people have hypothyroidism today? It's almost epidemic. Never used to be. I for infirmity. In the areas where they fluoridate the water and there are large amounts of fluoride in the water, why the people age prematurely, they become disabled, and they die much earlier. And the studies are there, specifically in areas in Afghanistan and China, with high fluoride areas. If you want to die quickly, you move into those areas. D for dental fluorosis. E for endocrine dysfunction. Attacks your thyroid, attacks your testosterone level. And then let's get over into mercury. Of course, mercury is the most toxic substance to the brain we know of today. So what are they doing? They're putting it in the fillings in our mouth. They're putting it in various vaccines. And today, they're trying to stampede the American people to give adult doses of the influenza vaccine to their children 6 months old. I mean, it's criminal activity. And we know what it does to the people over 65. If Dr. Fudenberg's work, what does it do to the brain of the infant? Well, there are evil people in the world today, ladies and gentlemen. When you understand that, everything makes sense. It creates endocrine dysfunction, it decreases pregnancy. And dental technicians who work with mercury have a much higher incidence of miscarriages. It produces autoimmune disease, that's R for rheumatoid-like diseases. It's probably related to Parkinson's disease and spinal cord disease, and probably related to cancers. So if you look at aspartame and fluoride, and mercury, they attack the mind, they lower the testosterone level, and they decrease fertility. Aspartame and fluoride promote cancer, and mercury probably promotes cancer. Abraham Lincoln, addressing the Lyceum in Springfield, Illinois, said this: "At what point should we expect the approach of danger? By what means should we fortify ourselves against it? Should we expect some transatlantic giant to step the ocean and crush us with a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe and Asia and Africa combined could never by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a mark on the Blue Ridge, not in a trial of 1,000 years. Then at what point should we expect the approach of danger? And I answer, if it ever reaches and must spring up among us, it can never come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, then we ourselves must be its authors and its finishers. As a nation of free men, we shall live through all time or die by suicide." And as I said earlier, the media is controlled. Secondly, your lives and the lives of your children are endangered. Thirdly, someone's behind this. Those of you who saw the film earlier today, didn't show up very well on the screen. That's a picture of Madame Blavatsky. She was a theosophist. She was a Luciferian. If you've read my book, Brotherhood of Darkness, you'll find her quotations talking about how Satan, Lucifer are God. Her disciples included George Bernard Shaw, Margaret Sanger. Adolf Hitler kept a copy of her secret doctrine on his table every evening, and this is where he got the supernatural power that he used to control the people of Germany. His whole occult movement was built upon theosophy and the Thule Society and these occult movements. Until we understand we're involved in a spiritual battle being fought on a political and ideological battlefield, we really can't understand anything that is going on today. So let me conclude with one of my favorite quotations. "Back of all that foes had plotted, back at all that saints had planned, behind the schemes of men and demons is a higher hidden hand. Warp and woof our heaven created, every pattern good and wise, oft confusing in earthly standards, but good and wise in heavenly eyes. Though the cause of evil prospers, yet his truth alone is strong, though her portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong. But that scaffold sways the future, for in the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own.